If you could not so excessively ad-lib in the future.
Any of my comments about your ad-libbing?
If you would just quit ad-libbing, you could preach a 22-minute sermon.
I didn't say it.
I did.
Welcome to the Afterword podcast from Union Church in Livingston County, Michigan. Each week we sit down to think out loud about how the gospel of Jesus Christ and the truths of his word connects to the questions, issues, and practices of everyday life. And today we're talking about 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and the day of the Lord. Hey everybody, welcome to the Afterword podcast. My name is Kyle and I'm here with my co-pastor and co-host, Ethan.
Ethan Ezikian. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen.
I wanted to have like a nickname,
Yeah.
Ethan Bright Eyes Ezikian.
Yeah. Ethan Bright Eyes Ezikian and Kyle Sour Patch Kid.
See, when I thought of you, the first thing that came to mind was bright eyes, and the first word that came to mind for you was sour, and you just had to come up with something.
I don't know. I love you. I think very highly of you. I don't know what came out of me just now.
Well, Ethan, this past Sunday, we did not meet for church.
Yeah, we didn't. It was a real bummer.
It was a bummer. So what happened on Sunday morning? I got a call from you all of a sudden at 7:15.
Yeah, most of the setup team beat me to church that morning, and they were already in the process of unloading the trailer. But immediately I was told, we have a problem. There's a few inches of water on the floor in a few parts of the school. And initially we thought, it'll be okay. It's not in parts of the school that we use. But come to find out, there was a burst pipe, which affected the whole building's water. And there was also no heat in the building for some reason that I don't understand. And so legally, they couldn't rent us the space. So we had to leave, which was a bummer. We didn't, these are the times when it's both wonderful that we don't have our own building because
we don't have to.
My goodness, we don't have to deal with a burst pipe, but also like, oh man, I just wish we could have had space to meet in as a church. I truly missed gathering with Union Church yesterday.
Yeah. So we didn't have church on Sunday, at least at Union Church, but you did still preach your sermon for the people of Union Church. We put it up on all of our platforms yesterday. You were able to record the sermon, and you'd put a lot of work into it. And it's the last sermon that you're preaching for a few weeks as you take some time off. So where are you going to be over the next few weeks?
Lord willing, well, I'm having surgery tomorrow. I have just a large but benign tumor in my thigh. And we've been calling it Hal at my house. So Hal, the tumor, is being taken out of my leg tomorrow.
It's being removed. Forcibly removed.
Yeah. All indications are it's a benign tumor. They have to do final testing on it when they take out. So there's part of us that is just continuing to pray for positive test results after they remove it. But I'm going to have a big old 10-inch incision on my leg to heal from. And so I don't foresee being at church at least this coming Sunday, and then I'll just be attending for a few weeks instead of leading from the front or helping with setup or anything like that. So I was especially looking forward to being with Union Church yesterday for that reason. Yeah. Knowing that, number one, I'm not going to be able to be with the church for a little while, and number two, I'm definitely not going to be able to preach to the church for a little while. So when we had to cancel church, I felt like, I still would be a good thing to try to get the content here out in some way. But it was kind of like, I can't think of a good analogy, but it's like eating turkey when it's not Thanksgiving. It's just not as good. There's one day a year when turkey tastes really good. And in the same way, preaching a sermon but not being with the people of God was not what I long for,
Yeah, it's not the full experience. So, I'm glad that you did still get to record the sermon. That means it gives us a chance now to talk about the text that you preached on, and hopefully it gives a chance for the people of Union Church to still reflect on this passage from 1 Thessalonians, the first half of chapter 5, as we've been working our way through the entire book of 1 Thessalonians and, Lord willing, through 2 Thessalonians. So this past week, then the text that was assigned to you was the first 11 verses of chapter 5.
Yeah.
We continued to think on the theme of Christ's return. That was the theme that Paul introduced last week as we finished up chapter 4, and he continues on that theme here this week. So would you mind reading your passage and then giving us a summary of what we should be taking away from this passage in 1 Thessalonians?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm going to read all 11 verses, 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 11. Now concerning the times and the seasons, brothers, you have no need to have anything written to you. For you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying, there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains come upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you are not in darkness, brothers, for that day to surprise you like a thief. For you are all children of the light, children of the day, and we are not of the night or of the darkness. Don't worry, friends. That's just a train, not the trumpet of the Lord blowing in the background of the podcast. This is where our church office is, near a train track. All right, continuing at verse 6. So then, let us not sleep as others do, but let us keep awake and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet the hope of salvation. For God has not destined us for wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, so that whether we are awake or asleep, we might live with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
So one of the things that really caught my attention as I was preparing for this sermon this last week is just some of the conversations I've had. I think because you preached a little bit about the second coming of Christ last Sunday, it was sort of on the minds of people in our church. And so through that, in a couple of conversations, we talked about looking forward to the second coming of Christ as Christians. And I think a few people were just honest, and they talked about how it makes them uncomfortable and anxious. And as I look back on my own experience as a Christian or as a minister in the church, I think that's the primary response that I feel from most Christians. And I mentioned that in the sermon a little bit, but that was my primary burden coming into this last Sunday preaching. Knowing that for a lot of people, this is something that makes us uncomfortable, and therefore we want to shy away from it or minimize it. And yet that is not the posture that God's word takes when it talks about the second coming of Christ. There is a posture of readiness and waiting and eagerness. Mm-hmm. And like the passage ends, it's meant to encourage us as God's people. So that was the tack I took. Just if we could just look at this truth together and not flinch away from it, then maybe it would encourage our hearts. And so was not very nuanced, was pretty just straightforward with the main point of the sermon, which I just said was Jesus is coming again. The day of the Lord will come, and we must be ready and waiting for the day. And we kind of unpack that in 3 sub-statements. So we spent some time talking about the reality that the day of the Lord will come. That's sort of an assumed reality in Paul's text, so we talked about that a little bit. And then we talked about how the day of the Lord will come and it will be joy for believers. And then the day of the Lord will come, so we should be ready. And we got into Paul's language of putting on the armor of faith and love and preparing our hearts for that day, all so that we might be encouraged. I think I said in the sermon, we can have strength for today because we have a bright hope for tomorrow. That was my callback to old and well-known hymn. So that was kind of that's the broad sketches of the sermon. And yeah.
Now, one of the old kitschy phrases that sometimes gets thrown around when you start talking about the end times or what happens after death is, so and so is so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. And you kind of talked about this in your sermon a little bit. We can kind of fall into two ditches, which is one of which is we're so focused on whether it's a theology of eschatology, like we talked about last week on the podcast, and the end times and Christ's return, that we kind of lose sight of reality in the here and now. But then there's this other ditch where we just ignore it, and we're just so focused on the here and now that we really, Christ's future is just kind of a nebulous, Christ's future return is just kind of a nebulous thing that doesn't really affect our here and now.
Yeah.
And so when we think practically as Christians about trying to cultivate a genuine joy and desire to see Christ return, and yet not lose sight of where we are in the here and now. In particular, what I'm thinking about is we've been going through Ecclesiastes as a church in our Bible studies, and Ecclesiastes does talk a lot about how this world is broken and vanity, and yet the hope in Ecclesiastes is not look forward to the future. It's enjoy the good gifts of the Lord now. So how can we do, like, practically, what does it look like to do both of those things? To cultivate eagerness for Christ's return and enjoy the good gifts of God in the here and now.
Yeah. One of the first things that comes to mind is I think that the people who get accused of being so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good may not be fixing their mind on a right theology of what is to come. And here's what I mean by that. Like, if your attitude about the world is that everything is going to burn and it's all going to go away and we're just going to be in heaven forever, then you don't have much incentive as a Christian to be of much like practical earthly good right now, unless you're just focused on sharing the gospel and winning souls, which is vitally important. But I don't think that's the picture the Bible paints. I think the picture that the scriptures paint are that all of creation and all of heaven are longing for the day when Christ will come and make all created things new. Mm-hmm. The Bible says that the history of humanity will not, go on into eternity as, people sitting on clouds that are just kind of like floaty spirit beings. We are going to live in the new heavens and the new earth with Christ. And as you study what the scriptures say about those new heavens and the new earth, there's strong reason to believe that there is a renewing element there. So I often think about the new heavens and the new earth and try to imagine it being highly familiar to me, except refined, with every ounce of sin and brokenness taken out. And if I think about my future with Christ that way, it means that so many of the joys that I experience today are not going to be just faded memories. They're going to be like present realities for me, except times a million, bajillion, cajillion with the Lord. So I have more incentive to be a good steward of creation because the Lord is going to keep me here in this renewed heavens and the new earth. I have more incentive to care about the vocation that I have, about culture building as a human, because I think it's actually building towards something good, and I think we'll have artifacts of that in the world to come. What do you, am I being crazy here as I talk about this, or do you think?
There's a couple passages that come to mind. The first, you mentioned there being like some sort of artifacts in the new heavens and the new earth of culture building in the here and now. And one of the passages that's often pointed to for that reality is Revelation chapter 21. You quoted Revelation 21 in your sermon as one of your favorite passages. You can't read it without crying.
Not usually, no.
That God will be with us and we will be his people. He will wipe every tear from our eyes. There will be no more pain or suffering. That chapter ends with this vision of the heavenly city coming down to earth, and it ends like this. They, talking about the kings of the earth, will bring into the heavenly city the glory and the honor of the nations. They will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations. There's this sense that even Again, this is coming out of obviously the New Testament is coming out of a Jewish context, and there's the sense that even the pagan nations of the earth, in some sense, on the day of the Lord, will honor the Lord with the good that has come out of them. I don't know exactly what that means, but it does give a little bit of a sense that, okay, life in the here and now actually does endure to that day somehow.
Yeah, that gives me a lot of hope. And that's worth probably talking about in depth in another podcast someday. I think maybe more immediately, we do need to take to heart Paul's encouragement to believers, like Paul's example to believers, where he says, to live is Christ and to die is gain. That's in Philippians 1. Paul's talking about the possibility of his own personal end more than he's talking about the end times. But there's this similar posture of like, I would love to be with Jesus right now. I would be happy to die and be with him. That's Paul's attitude. And at the same time, he says, yet I know it's better for me to be here with you to do the work that God has called me to do. Yeah. So there's no part of Paul that is in any way drifting towards this idea of, well, I just better off myself so I can hurry up and go be with Jesus. He's fully invested where God has him. And it's part of his obedience to Christ to not be detached from the world in front of him right now. And we can have the same sort of attitude as we think about, we can be cultivating an eagerness and anticipation to be with the Lord. And yet, part of our obedience to him in the moment would be to not be detached, to not be useless in the here and now, but to be, eagerly anticipating and fully invested at the same time.
I mean, the more you come to know and love Jesus, the more it's possible to do both of those things. I think that is probably the biggest thing from Paul's example. When he says to live is Christ and to die is gain, he's putting all of his life and his future death in the sphere, in the dimension of Christ, right? Like, so for him, he can look forward to being with Christ after his death or Christ's return and saying, to be with Christ would be far better than anything I've experienced now. But life right now has everything to do with Christ. It's Christ is giving me good gifts in the here and now. He's given me people to minister in the here and now, which honors him and glorifies him. That is a huge joy to me. So everything for Paul gets put in this under the umbrella of loving and serving and glorifying the person of Jesus Christ. And if you can, the more and more you come to see Jesus as glorious and as satisfying, I think the more it becomes natural to do that sort of balancing work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Ethan, one of the things that comes out of this passage is a refrain that is heard elsewhere in the New Testament as well, both from Jesus and from his apostles. And it's this exhortation to stay awake or to stay sober. Particularly here, Paul is contrasting the posture of believers with those who are unbelievers and are kind of ignorant or at least ignoring the reality of the day of the Lord to come. So, two questions. One would be, okay, well, what does it mean to be awake, to be sober? And second, how do we do that in a culture of distraction that maybe, as you talked about in your sermon, lulling us to sleep? So what does it mean to stay awake and to be sober, and how do we do that practically in a culture of distraction?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe you're like me, Kyle. Sometimes I will get lost in my phone. This is just a mini example of a broader teaching point, I suppose. But I'll get lost scrolling on my phone, and before you know it, 30 minutes has gone by. When it feels like it's been 5, and I look up, and it's almost like I'm like taking that like deep breath again, and I realize like, oh my goodness, I just frittered away 30 minutes of my time. What a waste. I think to some degree, all of us can identify with some kind of experience like that. I think that is a small example of what Paul and the apostles and Christ are talking about when they talk about falling asleep. Becoming so focused on the most fleeting things that we don't have a broader wakefulness to the real things happening and what's really important, what's really true, what's really consequential. So to stay awake, I think, is not it's not to withdraw, but it's to remain aware of that which is most real and most important and most consequential to the world around us, which means for us as believers, we're aware of that which is most important, and it is God. He's like Colossians 1 says, that in everything Christ might be preeminent. He's preeminent over our lives, and we have our eyes fixed on him, and we see him as most valuable, but not only most valuable, like most consequential in the world, most powerful, most able to work, most in the one who is in control. And I think we can work our way through life attuned to that reality or asleep, ignoring that reality. And that's the sort of readiness, the soberness. I think all the metaphors mean the same thing. Don't fall asleep. Don't get drunk. Don't be caught unawares, like the parable of the 10 virgins who aren't prepared for the coming of the bridegroom. I think they all mean the same thing of being ready, being watchful, being awake. Not only waiting for the day of Christ's coming, but aware of and attuned to his reality and his work in the world today. So there's so many ways that works itself into our life. But I think generally, we can just, it's not necessarily the mechanics of what we do. One person might go through their day and have their morning cup of coffee and take their kids to school and go through their vocation and then come home and have dinner. And they might go through that day like totally aware of the reality of God and his work in the world and attuned to his desires and the things he loves. And then somebody else might do the exact same things, but be totally asleep, totally walking through life like a zombie. Their priorities are different. Their affections are different. How do you think you would explain these sorts of things in the passage?
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
That's what I do. That's what I do when I run out of things to say. I just ask you the same question. I don't know if you've noticed that in the podcast.
I think definitely the emphasis here is staying awake to the Lord's return. That's the whole thing, right? The master would come and catch you unawares, whether you're sleeping or drunk. That's the metaphor, right? Mm-hmm. The metaphor here isn't, or the instruction isn't, don't physically go and get drunk on alcohol, or don't sleep too much. That's not what Paul's saying, right? Yeah. It's a metaphor saying, like the servants who are supposed to be preparing for their master to return, and instead fall asleep or get drunk, assuming that it is going to be farther away. Instead, stay awake and be ready. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, how do we stay ready for Christ to return? And there's probably a few practical things we could talk about there, but I do think that the first part of the exhortation is the awareness, which is what you just talked about. And I think it's important, like you highlighted, that it's not necessarily the mechanics of what you do.
Yeah, I think there are clear boundaries. Mm-hmm. What is moral and immoral, right or wrong for Christians. Mm-hmm. But there are so many things that we can move through life that are morally neutral, and it's all about our heart posture as we work through them.
Mm-hmm. One of those things that I would say is the flip side of the boundary would be the positive exhortation, or the positive pattern that Christ has given to his people. One of those things is to come together and worship every week. And part of what happens when we come together and worship every week is a recognition that there is something more than just the horizontal, just the thing right in front of our eyes. The refrain of the church for hundreds of years now has been Christ has come, Christ has died, Christ has risen, and Christ will come again.
Christ will come again, yeah.
And that has to be a part of our hope every week as we gather, is to think about how our hope is ultimately in his return and resurrection, our resurrection.
And I think because what I said earlier, because this is something that's maybe de-emphasized for whatever reason in modern Christianity, we don't use the coming of Christ as a balm to our souls.
Yeah, it's more fearful than...
It's nervous for us, but it is comforting. It's
supposed to be.
Like, think about the context. Like, Paul, from your passage last week, Paul is telling the Thessalonians, hey, don't worry about those who've fallen asleep. Mm-hmm. They're not going to miss out on the coming of Christ. They're gonna rise and be a part of it, just like you will. Mm-hmm. And he's using the coming of Christ as a comfort to the people. And I just think, like, okay, if tomorrow when I go in for my surgery, they take that tumor out and they're actually like, wow, it's the worst cancer in the world. Part of my hope in that moment as a Christian is that is not the last chapter of my story. Mm-hmm. The last and longest, most everlasting chapter of my story is that I'll be with the Lord, and none of this will be, no hint of sin or the brokenness of sin in the world is going to be present anymore. And that's true when we look at the chaos of the world. We think about, wars and rumors of wars. Like, the Lord will come again, and every king will bow the knee before Jesus. And all the people who are across all the world who are suffering in a multitude of ways that we are just powerless to help with, well, Jesus will come again, and everybody who belongs to him will have everything they need. And the work that we do, that we pour ourselves into, and that we only taste like a fraction of the fruit that we hope to get out of the work, well, Christ will come again, and everything that we've poured out for the sake of the kingdom will be worth it. Mm-hmm. And we don't let ourselves go there, and we don't comfort ourselves with that knowledge. That doesn't make us not any good to earth when we're heavenly minded like that. But it gives us the appropriate vision for this life, which is we are just far less important than we think we are, like in the scope of history. Like we are so present, we're so aware of the 50 or 70 years or 80 years or 90 years that the Lord's going to give us. And we need to remember more of the endless years that we will have in the kingdom and let them color the way we think about these fleeting moments that we've been given. So
try this on for size. You talked a little bit in your sermon about an article that you'd read on Desiring God.
Everybody should go read it.
What was the title of it?
The author's name is John Bloom. I know that for sure. And it's something called like Satan Will Sing You to Sleep.
Yeah, something along those lines. So a big part of that article is this witness of a couple who's from a Middle Eastern country, becomes Christians, and at some point they move to the United States. Mm-hmm. And when they're in the United States, at some point the wife says to the husband, we should move back to the Middle East because there is the Satan is doing a lulling to sleep here in this Western world of comfort. And I wonder if some of that instinct that we have to be nervous about the day of the Lord instead of eager for it is the fact that we do live in such a comfortable reality. So when Paul's writing to the Thessalonians, remember, they're under persecution. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no law that's being passed in Congress that's going to lessen their persecution. There's no future Roman emperor rising through the ranks who's a Christian who's going to save them. It's all they know so far is that becoming Christians has been made life hard for them. Yeah. And so it was easy may not be the right word, but natural, as they were taught about the coming of the Lord, to look forward to that with eagerness. So for us, though, if it feels at a day-to-day level like, well, we have everything we need, then it does make it a little bit less instinctual, at least, for us to look forward to that day with joy and with eagerness. So how is that? How do we overcome that reality? I mean, maybe it's we need to make ourselves a little less comfortable. What do you think?
Man, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It makes me think about Jesus' words that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Man, is it hard. We are just enormously rich in our country, wherever God has placed us. We enjoy so many comforts that the rest of the world and most people throughout history haven't enjoyed. So I do think that it gives us an outsized sense of like we have everything we need here. Which means I think it's probably worth just praying about and considering, like, how much am I idolizing the comforts that the Lord has given me? It's not wrong to have things, like stuff generally is a morally neutral thing. Riches generally are morally neutral, but they do open us up to a lot of temptation to trust in created things rather than our Creator. Yeah, I mean, I talked about in the sermon, and you mentioned it a little bit in yours last week, about how when we think about the end times, there's a sense of like a fear of missing out. Like, Lord, don't come back before I can fall in love, or don't come back before I can watch my grandkids grow older, things like that. Yeah. But I also think, like, for a lot of us, the conception that we have of the end times coming maybe involves a lot of suffering. Like if you've kind of been taught an eschatology that includes like a heavy emphasis on the tribulation and persecution and stuff like that. And so we think, I just don't want to go through that, Lord. Like I love my life, and I love my stuff, and I frankly love my comfort, and I don't want to be uncomfortable. And because of that, I think the coming of Christ gets painted as this like divine interruption of the things we actually value more than the Lord. I mean, when we're really honest, like we just want our barns and everything that fills them. And we want all of our schedule, and we want our ambitions, and we want our hopes, and we want our plans. And we would really like all of that to be baptized in some Christian language. And when our time comes at the end of our long days, we'd like to go to heaven. But the Christian vision is all of my ambitions and hopes and plans laid at the foot of the throne of God. And we probably need to grapple more with what that looks like.
Yeah.
Especially in our comfortable Western context. To take it in another direction, the article that we referenced is primarily about the discomfort of evangelism. And I think most Christians I've ever known here in Michigan, in the United States, are like, evangelism is hard, and mostly it's hard because it's really uncomfortable. And man, if we would just look at that whole situation with Christ is coming back sort of lenses, I think we would care for people a lot more and share the gospel with them a lot more boldly.
With sober and awake lenses.
Yeah.
So let's kind of shift more in that direction as we start to wind down here, Ethan. One of the things that I think can be particularly anxiety-inducing for Christians when they think about talking about faith with their non-believing friends and family is the pokey parts of Christianity, the parts that are caricatured in media and in the world around us. And one of those pieces is particularly this idea of the day of the Lord, the idea that one day the Lord will serve judgment upon his enemies. How can we talk about that day and the justice of the Lord to our unbelieving friends and family without simply coming across as kind of a hellfire and brimstone street preacher.
Yeah. Maybe some Christians would say, like, I just don't like being harsh. I don't want to be unloving to people. It's been a minute since I've read the book 1984. Have you ever read that book? Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna get the specifics right, but I remember in that book, part of the dystopian future that gets painted is that words are constantly being given new definitions, and so what we might understand to be good or safe or loving, like the big brother is constantly redefining what that means. And friends in Christ, I just think we do not realize the extent to which we have allowed a non-Christian perspective to big brother many of our words and redefine what it means to be harsh, or what it means to be loving, or what it means to be kind, or what it means to be safe, what it means to be just. I think we just need to, like, before we even grapple with the theology of wrath and sudden destruction and all these things, we just need to, like, define those things biblically and start to look at the world that way. Because I really want to be, I love the word winsome. Some Christians want to debate about that word, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore what I just said. But, like, I do want people to hear the truth, and I want them to hear the truth, and just, even if they don't want to believe, they wish it was true, kind of thing. So I want to talk about the resurrection of Christ, and I want to talk about the wrath of God and everything in between. And by the end, I want to convince people that it's good. But if we're going to do that, we have to, like, talk about those things, like, according to the terms the Bible gives us, not trying to not try to, like, wedge the truths of God's word inside the definitions of good or loving that the world gives us. So I think if we do that, we will find that the wrath of God for sin is righteous and just and good. And I think we need to start there. In the sermon, I talked about how, like, the resurrection of Christ can like bear the weight of all of Christianity. Like, if Jesus is raised from the dead, then everything must change, and his word must be true. And one of the things that means is, if Jesus rose from the dead, it validates everything he's taught. And Jesus talked about the wrath of God for sin more than almost anything else. So we need to grapple with that. We don't get to have, like, a nice, non-offensive Jesus that we love, because if we really grapple with what he taught, like, he is presenting these things to us. And we need to wrestle with that. We also need to recognize that, or maybe, like, part of that same whole conversation is that it is a lot easier for Christians in other times and places to talk about the wrath of God than we have it here. Like, the wrath of God offends our modern Western sensibilities. But maybe, just like we were just talking about, in places where people suffer more and more regularly, like, it is so much more comforting to hear, like, there's a God of justice who is not going to let any wickedness go unpunished. When we live in context, when people live in context, when wickedness has the upper hand again and again, and the like the Psalms tend to say, like, the wicked are the ones who have it easy. Like, those are the contexts when it's a comfort to hear, like, God doesn't let wickedness slip through the cracks.
And I think everybody, even in our modern context, modern people do have a longing for justice that that speaks to. But we often think of ourselves as outside of the camp of the guilty who need justice. It's a justice for thee and not for me. And so I think one of the ways that might make it easier for us to talk about this is if someone's coming to you and saying, okay, or if you're going to somebody and you're warning them about the reality that if they're not right with the Lord, they're going to have to face him someday. And they will face his wrath if they remain stubbornly resistant to the grace of Jesus Christ. If the retort then becomes something along the lines of, okay, well, I want justice, that or that's not fair, or that doesn't seem very loving, and you can talk about, okay, well, you want justice, you don't want so and so who you see as unjust, as an unjust or corrupt politician, or whoever, Hitler, like, you want these people to face justice, don't you? Right. And then I think what often happens is there's a moving of the goalposts, because now that starts to get uncomfortable. It's like, well, yes, I want justice for those people, but are you really saying that me who tries to take care of my kids and who gives to charity, are you really saying that I deserve the same thing as Hitler? Mm-hmm. That's like the next response. And I think too often as Christians, we get stuck with this, okay, now I've got this logical dilemma. Christian, if you are assured that God really is just, then I think it's pretty easy to say to that person, actually, no, I'm not saying that you and Hitler deserve the exact same thing, but I know that God is perfectly just. And on that day when everybody faces him, we will get exactly what we deserve. Nobody's going to say that there has been injustice done by the wrath of God. So you don't need to worry about how the Lord is going to deal with Hitler. You need to worry about how the Lord is going to deal with you, and whether or not you actually have honored him in the way that he is worthy, whether or not you have actually sinned against his law in all these different ways. I think sometimes we let people off of the hook with the logical fallacies that people want to bring up, rather than just saying, hey, you need to worry about what happens when you face the Lord.
Yeah. Two passages. Two quick verses that come to mind. First is 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. And then from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Mm. I think the very beginning of grasping the gospel is coming under conviction of sin, is realizing I deserve the wrath of God, and God is just to punish me, and to recognize the gracious and merciful invitation of the cross. Which means if you are a Christian, just one of the foundational ways you see the Lord is fundamentally different than those who are not believers. Like, the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to you who are being saved, it is the wisdom of God. Which means I think there's an element to all of this as well. That's just like, we need to get comfortable with the idea that the Spirit of God has done a gracious act in our hearts, and therefore we once were blind, but now we see. And so maybe the thing that we need to do is couple our honesty about the theology of Christianity with fervent prayers that the Spirit of God would unblind the eyes of those whom we love and are talking to about these uncomfortable yet true doctrines.
I was talking to a woman today who was saved because somebody looked her in the eyes and said, whether you believe it or not does not change whether or not it is true. Mm-hmm. So if it is true that there is a God and you will face him someday, then what?
Yeah. So it's encouragement for us, even if we can't find that way to make the coming wrath of God feel good to people who don't believe. Like, it's encouragement for us to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Being honest about it and not shying away from it. Because like Paul said, he says, but that's not you. Like, that day is going to be joy for you. Mm-hmm. And that's what's true for you as a believer.
Amen. So let's keep talking about it, and let's keep hoping in it. Well, friends, we're grateful that you have tuned in for another episode of the Afterword podcast. The goal of this podcast, as always, is to equip the people of Union Church for discipleship and for mission. If you are a Christian listening from another context, we're grateful that you've joined us, and we're praying that this conversation might help you to follow Jesus and engage in his mission wherever he has placed you. We would love to hear from you. So if you have thoughts, feedback, or questions, send an email to connect@unionchurchmi.com and include the word podcast in your email subject line. We may have a continued podcast episodes over the next few weeks as Pastor Ethan is taking a break. But we will see you sometime soon for another episode of the Afterword podcast. Each week we sit down to think out loud about how the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Each week we sit down. Sit down, sir. I say. You lose. No head shall be higher than the king. Etc., etc.
I was thinking of Willy Wonka. That's where I was going.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Have you seen the original Willy Wonka?
I mean,
like,
back when I was
old school, like Purple Suit.
Yeah.
Gene, what's his name?
Hackman? No, not Gene Hackman.
Not Gene Hackman.
Wilder.
Yeah. End of the movie. He's telling Charlie that he doesn't live up to the standards. He's you lose. Good day, sir.
We should use that in a sermon. Can you imagine? Like, you're a sinner. You don't live up to the standards. You lose. Oh man, the volume is a little out of control today. All right, ready, set, go.